Hi everyone, my name is Joe Stewart. This is Felipe Memoria. We're here to talk about the Virgin America redesign. I'm just going to kick it off. This is really more Felipe's thing as a more UX-focused event. Felipe is more the head of UX at our company. The two of us work together. I kind of handle more of the visual design. He did more of the UX and product strategy. So we're just going to turn it over for a brief history of this project.
Sure. All right, so a brief history of our company too. So, we're a brand new company. I'm not sure if you heard of us, probably not. We started last year. We're about 45 people now, and we have the headquarters in New York. We have an operation here in San Francisco, in Portland, and then an operation in Paris, and a brand new one in Rio de Janeiro, where I'm from. So it's very exciting. One of the reasons why we started a new company was actually to be able to implement a new approach. And that approach is, heavily influenced by our experience through the years of trying to extend the collaboration we have with clients. So this is the part of the presentation which is a little bit of the showing the backstage and not the prettiest things of the project, but basically our plan is always to collaborate as much as we can and make a unified team with our clients. So it's really like true collaboration. We actually sit with them. So when we were fortunate enough to get the project for Virgin America, I actually moved my family. I live in New York, and I moved my family here to San Francisco for 2 months to work at their offices. And this is the picture of our room there. So we still have this room. We still have a lot of people working there with them. And the other thing you can notice here is how there's not so many people working in the project. So that's another thing we wanted to do, is work with really small teams of very senior people collaborating, and it was a pleasure to get to work with Joe again, because before, we've been working together for, I think, 8 years now, but we rarely worked in the same projects, but now we have the opportunity to, so it's a lot of fun. Another important part of the process is that we, of course, do a lot of user tests, right? When we launched virginamerica.com, a lot of people were asking on Twitter and questioning if we actually tested it because it was so different. And the answer is, of course, right? Like, of course we tested, we're not amateurs, right? Like, how can you launch something like that without doing any user tests? It's the entire business of our clients, right? So we did several user tests. The calendar was, goddamn it, like, so difficult to figure it out. So that's just a little bit of the process. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the project itself now. And I'm going to have to run because we don't have a lot of time. So let's see if I could do a good job at that. This is basically the space, of airlines, I think current. And all of them have the same template if you think about it. They all have the widget on the homepage that I think is inspired on the JetBlue website that Joe worked with Mikkel, who's right there, back in the day. And I think after 7 years of that project, everybody just kept copying this. It's kind of frustrating sometimes in the industry. In the industry, everybody's like just copying each other, and basically, all the websites look the same. It's like the widget, which is basically a little form that's the only thing that users care about, and a lot of stuff around it that nobody cares about, right? Pictures and things like that. And the Virgin America site was actually successful. Like it was doing well for them, but it was about time to change. Because after a couple of years, like, you have to kind of update the design for several reasons. And that's what it looked like, and it was a very typical design for its time. And this is actually what we did, the result. You saw a little bit when you were waiting. So I think the interesting thing here is that the entire project is actually to make the best farm in the world, and Virgin was sophisticated enough, intellectually sophisticated enough to be able to focus and agree that there was only thing in the product that actually mattered. And that thing was the purchase path, was to sell more tickets and not to sell destinations or to convince people to fly to different places and things like that, right? So the image, the homepage is basically no pictures, and it's only 100% focused on the purchase path and making it very simple for people to buy a ticket. I'm going to talk a little bit about the global framework. It was good that you guys had time to see a little bit of the experience, because you're going to get a little more context around that. I could make it a full presentation just about this slide. I'm going to try to go fast, but a lot of things that we heard about the project was that the project was mobile first. It's like everybody talks about mobile first, but it's actually not. It was not a mobile first project at all. Actually, the desktop experience is much more important than the mobile experience. So it was actually a multi-platform project designed responsibly. We always had in mind every single page of the website when we were designing, especially the purchase path that took us like 2 months to nail, and we spent a lot of time on it. So one of the insights we had to make this best form in the world and make the experience a little better and easier for people was actually to do one thing at a time, to show one information, ask one question at a time, instead of having a lot of little fields and little pull downs together in a small space. So if you remember, the homepage is just asking you where you're flying to, from where to where, right? And we expanded that because Virgin doesn't fly to many places. So why would we actually put everything in a little pull down that is a trash can of links if you can expose everything? As UX people, we all know that if you expose things, it's more likely that people are going to actually click on them, right? So that's one thing. And the one thing at a time is a trick that we learned back in the day. It's a presentation trick, basically. I'm kind of breaking the rule here. There's a lot of points in the same slide, but typically, best practices tell you to say only one important thing per slide. And I think it's also the secret of the iOS design that to me was the best digital product of all time, because my kid can use, my grandma can use, and they also did one thing at a time. There was no multitasking. So I think that was basically the inspiration for it. There's also no continue button, so that's something that we, made sense for us because it was going to be a responsive project. So I think there's a lot of catch-up to be done on desktop based on patterns and interactions we noticed that, on different devices, on touch devices. So I think things are going towards getting a little more mainstream and a little more connected to each other, more consistent. So we decided to try it out. Instead of having, an interface where you select one thing, the other thing, and then click proceed, you just select one thing and move on. You select the other thing and move on, right? And that led to the need of a constant feedback of some sort. So in the entire website, when you click and move on, you have a bar on the top that is supposed to do what the success message would do in a typical form, right? Every time you submit a form, there's like a success message. Our success message is in the next page, and because we could design in a very simple way, in a phrase, we also used it to showcase a little bit of the voice of the brand. So it's always a little fun and interesting, and it changes depending on what you're selecting. And then the other thing is that the entire, 5, 6, and 7 are basically the same thing. It's one long page that never reloads, and it's easy to go back. So that was another insight. One of the biggest pain points in my personal experience with e-commerce sites is that you would go next, 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 and eventually if you missed something, you needed to go back, you would get that pop-up. Are you sure you want to resubmit all the information? Oh my God, So I didn't want to have that by any means in the project. So we decided to design something that was pretty much bulletproof. You almost can't make mistakes. But if you go back, you can just, on your phone, you can swipe up, just like you're trying to refresh a feed or something, and you go to the previous page. So every time you click and move on, you're actually going down and building this long single page that never refreshes, which helps a lot the experience itself. And also the last thing is like if I didn't explain, you probably wouldn't have noticed, but it's, the entire product is basically divided, the purchase path is divided in 2 sections. One is about building your trip, which is the most pleasant thing. You're like deciding where you're going, just picking your seat and things like that. And then the other part is about money. I personally hate to talk about money with anyone, and I'm just about, doing the work and the love part of it. So we decided to very politely, once you finish picking your things, to ask you if you actually want to talk about money. Do you want to pay it? Do you want to, go to this other process now there's more transaction? So it's just a little thing that we did. And now I'm going to cut this and just go through the pages and talk about them one by one. So you saw the homepage already. It's basically, half of it, 50% of it is just about the, picking where you're going to. You touch and you move on. It's also smart. So the fact that it's, recognize where you are, that's not so different, but it could go ahead, and even further. And, if it knows you're supposed to check in, it tells you to check in. The other interesting thing we did is that you probably noticed that there's no pictures and there's no marketing, there's no offers around the page or around the site in general, because we decided to do every single offer and every single marketing initiative inside embedded in the UI. So it's something that is actually useful for the users and actually good for them because it's hyper contextualized, right? It's always visible. There's no banner blindness going on. There's nothing of this sort. There's no like box on the side with a bunch of little banners. It's always embedded in the UI, not only on the home page, but it could be on the big calendar and in other pages as well. The other interesting thing is that, depending on the device you are, we can change a little bit priorities and actually prioritize other things. So we know that on the phone experience, it's very important for you to be able to quickly check in, because, at least me, and we notice with, user behaviors that you typically try to check in when you're in the cab trying to go to the airport. So we might as well just make it very clear. And on the rest of the pages, I'm just going to go one by one in a simplified fashion. So it just scrolls down. This is a page where you select the number of people that you're flying with. This is something that we changed after the user test, for example. The original version had that in the first space, was like building in the first phrase. So where you're flying from New York with the one person or something. And we were scared that people were going to miss it. So we actually created an extra step for it. And you can see that on the top, there's the summary in a very clear and clean way of what you're buying. And that keeps building up. In their past site, it was a section on the right that had so much information, like it was so cluttered, it was very difficult for you to actually understand. So we try to do it on the top, and you can open it at any time. It's always updating the price, and it's also always building on the things you're picking. And then we have the full screen calendar, which is something that we brought in from the pitch. When we pitched the business, we had this idea, and we kept it because it just works so great on the phone. That's one page that we thought already, since the beginning about the phone version and how to make it very easy for you to actually tap and select the date. So, and we did so many versions of this one. Oh my God, it was like it was so difficult. And but it ended up working really well. On the last user test we did was big success. And then it's the most complicated, difficult page of the entire purchase path, which is selecting your flight. So this page, before we designed it, had, I think, 7 different types of classes you could pick from. And nobody understands that. It's really difficult, because airlines use different names and everything. So what we decided to do is, like, there's the cheapest one, there's the most expensive one, and the one in the middle. Everybody understands this. So it's basically 3 types of classes you can pick. And once you pick one of them, you actually load the other options, the upgrade options, and things like that. The upgrade options were interesting because when we launched the beta, there was a lot of user feedback saying that we kind of used the dark pattern of pushing the upgrades too much. So we learned about that, and we actually fixed it to when we actually switched the site to be the live one. So that was an interesting thing we learned. And this also works on the phone. You swipe to the side to actually pick the things. And then after that is, again, one thing at a time, a big, beautiful plane that works great on the phone, works great on the desktop. You can upgrade, you can do whatever you want, very simple to understand. And then after that, so we changed, you probably didn't notice, but most airlines, they put the passengers before the plane. And that's because I think Sabre, which is the system that everybody uses, is kind of built for you to do that. And for us, it didn't make perfect sense. It's like, no, I want to sit here, and then, who's going to sit here is after, right? So first you pick your seat, and then you select, and you have the form, because we were trying to kill the forms and make everything like, based on touch, but we had to have a form for this one, especially for the first experience. If you're coming back later, you don't need to do it anymore. But in the first experience, we needed to have a little form in the flow. So what we try to do is actually, okay, so if we're going to have a form, let's make the best form of all time. So what it does is actually that, it's unbreakable, basically. You can't move on. You can't hit an X or continue or submit if you don't have everything filled. That's not so new, but we try to play with the validation a little bit. So the validation is in text and close to the field, and always making little jokes and fun. So if you put your name, it says, oh, nice name. If you put your phone number, it says, oh, you're from Brooklyn, or something like that. So the entire validation is kind of fun and nice because it's everybody hates forms, so we might as well try to have a little fun with it. And the other little thing, and I'm just telling this to you guys, probably, you're the only guys that are going to care about this, but we added an extra layer of detail on the button to proceed itself. So we tell in the button if you're missing a specific form. So if you forgot to fill your gender, the button says fix gender to move on, or something like that. So, another little detail that we're trying to make the experience as best as it could possibly be. So after that, you have the break, right, that I was talking about. It's like we're trying to be polite about it. All right, so if you picked everything, you assembled your flight. Do you want to pay now? Is it okay? Here's the summary. Here's everything you picked, expanded. You could expand this at any moment, but now we're expanding for you. Do you want to go on? And then if you say yes, all right, let's talk about money, and then it's a standard process for you to pay. We have on the right the details of your purchase, so you have always everything exposed and you know the final price. And on the left, the payment methods that are saved or not. So if it's your first time, you have to put the card. If not, you just select this card and move on. And then that's pretty much of it. But then there's more, actually, because there's so many little things. We put so much love into this product, So you want to talk about the rest of it? Yeah.
So I think, as you can see, most of this is pretty functionalist and minimal. There's a lot of white and just type in order to go through it quickly, but that doesn't necessarily meet the brand expectations. The version is pretty fun and alive and almost kind of sexy, so we needed to include that. So on every part of the site that we could, we try to introduce some energy. So this is the route map, which is normally a really tiny map with 1,000 dots. We turned it into a grid of these beautiful illustrations that Michael Place at Build did for us. So while this is a very functional page, it's very easy to read, it's gorgeous. There's lots of small touches when it comes to being quiet also. When it's time to check in, for instance, everything goes away. The site actually inverts to black, and the most prominent thing is just a gigantic button to check in. So knowing when to be quiet is incredibly important, especially when you're in a hurry, like in a check-in flow. There's also very small pieces like when you decide to print something. This is the only piece of print on the website. But even this can be special. This is the kind of thing that normally you forget about. But what we notice is most people fold these things in half or into quarters. So we just designed it that way. So on one quarter is everything the TSA needs. And on the other quarter, it allows you to have everything that the passenger needs, but legible. You can actually read it. The type is visible, and it's gorgeous. I think the point of this slide is to say that every small step can be beautiful and functional and special. And that was really our attitude with this project. That's it. Thank you. Questions? Sure.
Yeah.
How long was the project?
The project was pretty fast considering the scope. It was a grand total of 10 and a half months from our first meeting to launch. We also did the development. We worked with Virgin America's development team. We were responsible for the front end and the middleware. There's a ton of transaction that happens actually on the client side in the browser. So between conceptual design, user testing, design development, beta, and launch, it was a grand total of 10 and a half months, which for something like this, it being the first responsive airline site, the scale is actually very aggressive. But because we were so overlapped in terms of our teams, it was possible.
How did you manage getting buy-in? Did you get buy-in before those 10 and a half months because of the radical changes you were making, or was that part of the process, and how did you do that?
It was constant. We never presented anything. So this is actually the first time we've ever made a presentation of this work. We did it yesterday. But we never actually had presentations. We were just there, living there. They would just come in and we talk every day. It was much more like you were just talking to the designers that you work with. So there was never any buy-in. It was just everyday little steps forward. If there ever was a big question like, is this going to work or is this going to work? The answer was always, the user is God, so let's put it in front of them, and whatever they pick, we'll go with, and we can refine from there. But there was no buy-in. It was a constant buy-in.
I think there's two things interesting to say. One is that Virgin had a creative director that was amazing, was one of the best clients we ever had. You can only do great work when you have a great client, as you know. So he had a lot of power in the organization too, which is part of their culture, right? That's why they have the video of the safety guidelines on the plane that is so different. They risk things and they are very design oriented. So that was one, I think, important thing to notice. The other thing is that in the second week, in that little room that I showed you guys at the beginning, all the meetings were in that little room, and you're always like showing designs across the table in the displays themselves, right? And in the second week, actually, they brought the CEO to see where we were with the concepts, because at the time we had like 4 different directions for the homepage, and he liked everything, and we were building a story to try to get actually the one we liked approved. And all the story made sense. It was very clear after we presented where we kind of should go. So the CEO came 2 weeks down the road, and then he liked everything, and that was it. He already liked it, so we just kept going.
How many prototypes and ground user testing did you do?
Many, and it varied. There's lots of fidelities of prototypes and user testing, obviously. So we did basically 4 major rounds of giant user tests where we were bringing in people and spending multiple days in user labs and all that kind of thing. Maybe about 100 people did that, but we did constant prototypes. It's actually like our preferred way to present ideas is by building prototypes. And there's lots of ways to even do that, either just within Keynote or After Effects if we don't have very much time, or developing something directly in JavaScript. But over the course, I don't know, dozens and dozens and dozens, but proper formal user tests, I think 4, and then the big public beta.
And just so a story, my favorite story about the user test was that we're trying to, make tests with people with, different ages. And one of the users was actually much, much older than I expected, I guess. And she was coming with the little thing for her to, walk better. And I was like, oh my God, brace for impact, everyone's going to be a disaster. And she was actually the best user. She was just like, all right, and she was like just selecting and moving on. So at that moment, I think was one of the best moments of my career. I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, this is going to work. This is going to work. Because if she can do it, it's going to be easier for younger people. So that's just an interesting story about it.
One more question?
I don't have the Zimmer frame, but I use Redesign. I get a lot of clients all around the world. It's the best flight experience I've ever had. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Wow, that was really nice of you to say.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to change the end of this meeting, so thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.